Okay, welcome you to Awaken, all of you to Awaken. So, what we are doing is we are starting a new playlist based on archaeology. Now, you have seen many movies where we are getting stories from archaeology. Either they are showing the subject of archaeology. For example, if I take an example, Indiana Jones, though I didn't want to mention it, but it will help you to relate. You can understand that today's session is an introduction and it will tell you why should you study archaeology or what is archaeology, how we can relate to archaeology in a natural way. We are looking at things around us, we go to a place, we look at a place, we see that something is happening, somebody is digging something, they are measuring things, they are doing this and that. Then you ask the questions and they tell you, oh, this was here uh, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago. They are telling it. It can be ancient history, it can be recent past, many things. So, archaeology, when we are talking about archaeology, we are dealing with all these things. It can be artifacts, it can be so many other things. I will come to that. But Indiana Jones and movies like that, we can relate to that. A character, a plot, a story based on that, and there is mystery, there is suspense, there is action around that subject. So many things you can do, and the human relations. But if I talk about the facts and the real life scenario, you will see that, especially for the ancient cultures, sometimes it is very fact based because maybe you don't have enough writing available. So there are three kinds. If I tell you there are three kinds, one is prehistoric, where you don't have the writings available. If you don't have the writings available, then you have to take an approach that might be very different from the proto-historic archaeology you are doing. So when you are talking about proto-historic, it will be the incomplete records. You don't have the complete set of records. Now, when we talk about the historic, then we have well-developed historical records. Again, I will relate to few things. We talked about research methodology. We talked about research design, research statement, research question, data analysis, primary, secondary data, the way you collect the data, the way you analyze the data, the way you interpret the data. Because very recently we did a session on utilizing the research. Or we talked about utilizing the research in few other places too. So how you are doing the research, how you are looking at research. Again, the planned approach you can take, the exploratory approach you can take. Sometimes amateur archaeologists, they go to a place and they take their own approach. Then they can talk to the academics, and they can talk to the people who are actually uh, in that profession, and they can do a collaboration and they can do things. So curiosity is one thing. You can do it out of curiosity. You're going to a place. Suppose you go to place where you have the material remains, because material remains is something you will come across again and again when we talk about archaeology. You will go to a place where you have the material remains of Nalanda University, one of the great universities in India. So you will go to that place and you will see, okay, Nalanda University used to be there. What was the timeline? When did it exist? Who was the king then? Because India has been a country of the kings and the rulers, the kings, a lot of kingly stuff, aristocracy, kingly stuff, and then your this empire, and this in the good sense of the term, and then your this royalty, if I say royalty and all that stuff. So you have all these things in ancient cultures, but when you talk about an university like Nalanda University, people used to come to Nalanda. People used to go from here to other places. So that I have mentioned it again and again, so I won't mention it again. People used to come to India to study from Asian cultures, other cultures. People like Otis Dipankar Srigan, they used to go outside and they used to talk. about the Indian culture and other cultures. So there was a conversation, there was a exchange of knowledge, there was an exchange of culture. All these things were there. Now, if you look at archaeology, we can take it as a part of anthropology. So, what is anthropology? You're looking at these human beings, you're looking at the evolution of human beings. I'm keeping it very simple today. As an introduction, I'm keeping it very simple. Maybe from the next session onward, I can give you examples, I can show you pictures. But if you don't know what is the importance of this subject, beyond that name or beyond that definition or beyond that word itself, archaeology, which came from the Greek word archaios. So, what does it mean? If you don't understand that, it will be just a name, it will be just a word, and you won't delve deeper into those aspects. So each subject or each discipline, each subject and each discipline, it has something to do with knowledge gathering, wisdom gathering, your experience. It is not just a discipline. If you are studying that, why should you study that? If you want to solve a problem, if you are going for a research, why should you take that subject? Or if you talk to some other people, you can mention that subject. So you can mention archaeology, I'm doing this. You can mention anthropology. Now, we did a session on myths and scriptures. So I was thinking whether I should keep anthropology in myths and scriptures, or I should keep anthropology in archaeology. But as you know, that archaeology is a part of anthropology, so I think there will be overlap. But we will talk about anthropology in more detailed manner in this playlist. Then you can take things from here and you can relate to the myths and scriptures, and you can relate to the symbols in those scriptures, or maybe cave paintings, frescoes, the very ancient old paintings, and you go to a place and you see the carvings on a wall or on a stone, and then you take the help of archaeology and you date back and you figure out what was the timeline, when did it happen, what kind of people we had at that time. All these things, you do your research, you become very curious. Some people dedicating their entire life to this research, and it is so interesting. I can tell you, I have met some people, and I know when we have the discussions. For example, if I talk about city planning, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, we talk about, because these two cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, or if I talk about this Sindhu Shobbhota or Saraswati civilization, all these civilizations we talk about. Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, they used to have great city planning, at that time, much ahead of time. If I talk about the Mayan culture, we have a lot of symbols, we have a lot of languages or representation. People don't even understand, they cannot decipher, but they are continuously curious about that. Sometimes they can, sometimes they take help of other symbolisms, so that they can relate to it. So again, you have to look at it in a wholesome manner. Maybe you are doing a research in Egypt, and during that research process, during the data analysis, during the interpretation, so you are figuring out what was the tomb of Tutankhamun, what is a mummy. You have seen the mummy. So there is innuendo of archaeology, there is mention of archaeology, reference of archaeology here and there, though it's a dramatic story you are getting. But the moment you go to Egypt, you see the pyramids, you hear about the pharaohs, how they were kept, the chemicals they used to use to keep it intact, so that the body doesn't get dissolved. And the architecture of the pyramid, it has a great science. And then you have the symbolisms, it has a greater meaning. So all these things we are talking about. Now when we talk about anthropology, there is a thing called cultural anthropology, and there are other things as well, but I will mention two things mostly: cultural anthropology and লিঙ্গুইস্টিক অ্যানথ্রোপোলজি। আমরা অনেক সময় বলে থাকি না, বাংলাতে অপভ্রংশ, হয়তো পালি ভাষা, প্রাকৃত ভাষা, বাংলা ভাষাটা কোত্থেকে এলো, তামিল ভাষাটা এতদিনের সব থেকে পুরনো, সেটা কি আছে, সেখান থেকে সংস্কৃত কি সম্পর্ক, এরকম বহু কোয়েশ্চেন্স আসে। অনেকটা ভেরিফাইড হয়ে যায় অ্যাজ ট্রুথ, অনেকটা হয়তো একটা কিউরিওসিটি এক্সপ্লোরেশনের মধ্যে দিয়ে চলছে, ইয়েট টু ডিসাইড, বাট একটা ডিসকভারি চলছে, একটা রিসার্চ চলছে। কিছু কিছু এরকম থাকে, আর কিছু কিছু একদম প্রুভেন ফ্যাক্ট, অলরেডি ফ্যাক্ট আমাদের কাছে আছে, আমরা বলতে পারি যে এটা এই সময় ছিল, ইট ইউজ টু বি অ্যাট দ্যাট টাইম, দিস ওয়াজ দ্য টাইম লাইন ডিউরিং দিস পিরিয়ড, from this period to this period, this he was the king or she was the ruler of this area, and this is the scenario. People used to live like that, the entire city planning was like that, the architectures were like that, people used to live like that, and the the behaviors of people, the behaviors of human beings, these used to be like this, like that. So we do a lot of interpretation in this too. We have the data and we do a lot of interpretation. Now, um, Incas, they used to have great civilization, indigenous culture you can relate to a lot. So cultural anthropology and linguistic anthropology. Linguistic, you can understand it is dealing with the languages. So this linguistic anthropology, how it became from this to that. Now, it is a very important thing, and I will suggest some people to take it up, because you will see that sometimes we don't even know how the language became this from that. We are just looking at it from a different point of view, and we are just going with the flow. Sometimes we don't even think that how the language became this from that. But there are researchers, there are academics who are doing a lot of research on that. Many people are writing books on that. I can tell you from my past experience, because when I was studying art history a lot, Far Eastern art, art history, Asian cultures, European cultures, and different cultures, the Renaissance, and the pre-Columbian history, and so many other things I was studying. At the time, I was looking at archaeology. I was talking to some people who were doing the research. Some people wanted to do a lot of research. But here we are talking about in a broader context. Maybe your research is limited to a particular research question or a research statement. But here we are trying to give you a glimpse what archaeology is supposed to do. For example, it can be ancient and human past through material remains. It is the process. If I talk about the process, you have the research design, you have the implementation, you have the data acquisition, as I mentioned, you have the processing and analysis, you have the interpretation, and then you have the publication. You can publish the articles, you can publish the papers, you can publish a book. Sometimes you can do it out of your own curiosity, maybe, as I mentioned, discussing with other people, then you are writing your own book. So there are many ways, but sometimes when you do it from a like a credible publication, then it has more weightage, and you have a lot of data to support with. You are doing your graphs, you're doing your dating, you're doing your all this research, your pictures, you are taking pictures while doing the job itself. You will see a lot of picture where people are digging this, digging that, and they have restricted the boundary of this place. So those pictures help too, because you are doing this before it was like this, then you are doing this. Sometimes it's a very destructive process, because you have to destroy the thing after you do that. There are different aspects of it, and you have to protect it. So archaeology is helping you to protect a place. We talk about UNESCO and other organizations, UN, UNESCO, where we are protecting things, cultural heritage. What is it supposed to do? You are protecting this. When you are doing this, you are protecting the thing which is the things that are already existing. So suppose you have some sculptures, suppose you have some artifacts. Now you will see that nowadays the situation in India is like that. Very few people can reproduce it, because you don't have those human beings, you don't have those artists, you don't have that mindset, you don't have that artistic process. So you cannot reproduce that. Forget about that reproducing. You cannot create an art which is close to that. You might create your own art, but sometimes you look at those things and you just think that such a great piece of art, such a great work of art. Sometimes for layman, they go to the place and they just think that it is a great piece of art, it is a great work of art. But people who are actually studying it, they get more insights. They look at it in a more intricate manner. What is the material used, what is the geometrical shape, what is the aesthetic, what is it doing as an art, you know to people, and the educational value of it. There are so many other things, but this is very important that many people ignored that. We used to have this temple, for example. That temple was made by a lot of people, great artistry at the time, because they were those human beings. We don't have those human beings anymore. We don't have that art anymore. So even if you want to reproduce a temple in a particular place, you don't have those artists. You don't have those people. You don't have that artistic process. In the education, you are not putting more emphasis so that you can create more artists who can deal with the contemporary situation and can create that aesthetic, can create that art of artistic value or artistic importance or cultural significance. You're not doing that, but you're thinking you are building a temple, you are naming it this and that. We're not talking about that. Aesthetics, actual art, when you are feeling it, we are talking about that. The emotions it is evoking, a piece of sculpture, a piece of architecture, you know, these things are very important. So when you go to these architectures, when you go to these sculptures, you can feel that. How can you reproduce that? The basic question you don't ask. How can you protect that? You don't ask the basic questions. So sometimes these organizations help to protect it. Sometimes many people are having the vested interests. They want to steal it because the artifacts, they have a lot of value. uh, if you have an old artifact, it will have a, they can sell it and they can get money. And you will see many places where they are showing it in an exhibition, and they are taking all the effort to package it in a very sophisticated way, in a very subtle way, so that a scratch doesn't happen on the artifact or on the piece of material that they are going to exhibit. So that is professionalism. So you trust those institutions, you trust those organizations. They are doing all those things they need to do, in a very delicate manner. They are treating it with a lot of respect. They are understanding the value of it. And the people from whom they are taking it, they are telling them that we are taking it from you and we are going to return it to you intact. So they are doing all these packages, all these um, things that require for transportation, and they are taking care of the entire thing. So that is very important, because you have to understand it has the chronological value, it has the artistic value, and it has so many other things. Today you can create something, but it was created at that time. And what was the time? Archaeology is helping you to find that, right? So cultural anthropology, you can look at biological anthropology, where you're looking at human beings and the evolution of human beings. You can do all those things. There are things like paleontology, where you are studying ancient life, and we have obviously talked about epistemology, so we won't mention that. But you will see engravings and Paleolithic paintings. These things are of significance. Sometimes we do the underwater archaeology. Suppose you are going for Titanic, suppose you are going for other places, underwater, a city that is underwater. Once it used to exist, and there you are finding the material remains of the city. You're going actually underwater. You're actually using the cameras so that you can shoot underwater, and then you're doing finding the material remains. You're doing your research, and you're finding that it used to be at that point of time. This was the scenario around this. People used to be like that. So you're doing all those analysis and interpretations. Sometimes we have stories regarding that. So Mesopotamia, I think you have heard of Mesopotamia. So Assyriology, there is a thing. Indology, when we talk about India, Indology. Classical archaeology, classical antiquity, classical archaeology, when we are talking about Greece and Rome and all these places. Then there is Etruscology, Egyptology for Egypt. Then you have Phoenician and Punic archaeology, when you have Phoenicia and its colonies. Then you have Sinology, where you have China. But Asian cultures, people put a lot more focus, and the classical antiquity, Greece, Rome. When you talk about archaeology, when we talk about all these things, all these disciplines, people talk about these cultures. And then there can be archaeologists from different cultures, and they, just because of curiosity, a sense of exploration, they can go to another culture and they can discover different things. So sometimes, the thing is like, when you belong to one particular culture, you don't see things objectively. So when an archaeologist is coming from another culture, that person is looking at the artifact, that person is looking at the sculpture or that artifact in a different way, maybe in much more significant way. So then people from your culture can help. So it's a sense of collaboration. We are doing it together. Sometimes we lose that objective thing. We become very subjective. Oh, it has been there in our culture for oh, it has been in our cultures for a long time. So we don't need to think about that. But we can write about those stuff as well. It has been in our culture, and what did we learn from this? Maybe we can do a collaboration with some people of other cultures. They can bring their insights, they can bring their points of view and opinions. Then we can write a book, we can write something on that. You know, these things are important.